Hi, it's Sam. In today's tutorial, we're going to look at panning an audio signal. So let's start off by just creating a dial that's going to control the stereo image. So if we create a live.dial, then hover over the left side, you see this little green arrow. If you click on it, you'll find prototypes and then pan. And this gives you a nice control for panning left and right. So we'll use this to control the panning of our signal. And one of the simplest ways to think about panning is when you reduce the signal from one speaker, you're going to increase the volume from the other. So if you think about the volume going from, or the amplitude going from 0 to 1, if it's panned all the way to the left, it'd be 1 on the left and 0 on the right. If it's equal, it'd be 0.5. And if it was panned to the right, it'd be 0 in the left speaker and 1 in the right speaker. So the way that we think about how we control the amplitude of the signals relative to kind of where the panning position is supposed to be is called the panning laws. And this is a bit outside the scope of the video, so I'm going to leave a link to an online resource about panning laws if you're interested in learning more about that. But the takeaway that I want you to know is that this type of kind of linear panning has some problems because in the center position, it's not going to sound as loud as when it's panned to other positions outside of the center. And so there are different ways that people have come up with to try and compensate for this. And so I'm going to show you one of those. So let's start off by just creating a bang -1. And this will show you kind of how you could just get this simple linear panning. You have out of the right outlet goes from 0 to 1. So I could just use this, and I've got 1 on the left, 0 on the right, and then again 0 and 1, and then 0.5 and 0.5. So I've already set up this linear panning, which I said I want to avoid. But one of the kind of solutions or compromises is to just take the square root of these values. So now I'm still at 1 and 0 on the left and right, but in the center I'm at 0.707. And so this is one of the ways that we can compensate for this, what's called the hole in the middle effect, or the hole in the center, or something like that. And so we can now connect this up to our audio signal, and we're just going to use a multiplication. However, if we were to use it just like this, when we turn the knob, we're going to get kind of discontinuities in the signal, and that'll cause clicks and pops. So we want to smooth that out a little bit using line tilde. And we can just add a short ramp of 20 milliseconds. So let's use append 20. So it'll get the message 20 and then the new value to go to, and we'll ramp from whatever the current value is to the new value over 20 milliseconds. So that'll smooth out the signal while we're changing it with this dial. So let's set up let's grab a audio file. I'm just going to grab the duduk here. And let's connect it up. And I'm going to add a live gain and turn it down just a little bit. And then an easy deck. Okay, now let's give this a try. Now see, it's working, so it's pretty simple, straightforward, and we're not getting any clicks or pops, even if I move it really rapidly. Now from here, we can also try out the stereo LFO we made in the previous tutorial to create a tremolo effect. So I'm going to start off by just creating a B patcher with that LFO, which I named stereo LFO B patcher. You could download this from my GitHub if you didn't follow along with the previous tutorial. And make sure that this file is in your Max's search path so that it'll load it in the B patcher. So from this, we're going to have to change the signal. So right now, the signal is going to be from -1 to 1, but we want a control signal that's going from 0 to 1. And we also need to decide if we want this to be bipolar or unipolar. And basically, how to think about this, we want to use a bipolar LFO when we want to modulate above and below the center value. So in this case, the center value is basically in the center here. What is this, 0.5? And we want to modulate above and below that. So we do want to use a bipolar signal. Unipolar signals are useful when you want to modulate above or below a center value. So for example, if you're working with a control that goes like from 0 to 100, maybe you just want to go all the way up to 100 and then back to 0 again. In that case, it wouldn't make sense to use a bipolar wave that goes above and below whatever the value is that you're starting at. So since this goes from -1 to 1, let's do some simple operations. We're going to multiply it by 0.5. And then we're going to add 0.5. So this gives us -1 to 1, and then -0.5 to +0.5, and then 0 to 1. So now it's in the range that we want it to be. And let me just make a couple, let's see, scopes. So now we can see that it's in the range that we want. Now the other issue that you'll see in a moment is that we didn't add any smoothing to our LFO. So when I change some of the different parameters, I'm going to get some clicks and pops. So let me just show you that real quick. Let me disconnect this. And let's connect our LFO. How we can smooth that out is just using slide tilde. And so we'll put this after the addition operation here. And then we can use MS to samples and just create a little float. So slide expects a sample value. So now if I add a little bit of smoothing, say like 20 milliseconds, that's enough to smooth out those clicks and pops you were hearing. And now we have a working tremolo with that stereo LFO we made. And the nice thing about this is when we use a stereo effect, it really moves the audio around left and right, which sounds really interesting. But you can also use any of the other waveforms that we've added. So that's all I wanted to show you for today. We saw how to take the square root of the output of our linear panning to compensate for the hole in the middle effect. And I also showed you how to use the stereo LFO we built in my previous tutorial to create a tremolo effect. Hope you found this useful. Let me know if you have any questions or clarifications or something else you'd like for me to cover. Otherwise, until next time, class is dismissed.